Chapter 1. The Perfect Illusion. The sun dipped low over the rolling hills of Sonoma Valley, casting a golden glow across the sprawling vineyard estate Simon had rented for his daughter's wedding. It was everything she dreamed of. The string quartet playing softly under a canopy of fairy lights, rows of white roses lining the aisle, tables adorned with gold-rimmed china and crystal glasses that shimmered under the setting sun. It had cost him more than he could comfortably afford, but for his little girl, it was worth every penny. Simon adjusted the lapel of his navy blue tuxedo and exhaled, watching the guests filter into the outdoor reception area. Laughter floated through the warm air like bubbles. Glasses clinked. Someone near the bar was already tipsy and telling the story of how they once got caught sneaking into a country club pool. The world was buzzing with life, and he should have felt nothing but joy. His daughter, Chloe, was glowing in her white dress. The groom, nice kid, respectful, looked like he might faint. Simon had shaken his hand earlier and whispered, "Take care of her like she's the only girl in the world. Because to me, she is." He smiled at the memory. She had grown up so fast. One minute he was teaching her how to ride a bike in their old cul-de-sac. The next she was a woman, walking down the aisle with poise and purpose. His chest swelled with pride. He made mistakes in life, sure, but fatherhood? That he had given his all. A familiar voice jolted him from his thoughts. "Damn, Danny boy, you went all out." Simon turned and saw Colin, his old best friend, standing with a drink in hand, grinning like the devil. Same cocky smirk, salt and pepper beard now, and that air of effortless confidence Simon had always admired, maybe even envied a little. They hadn't spoken much over the past few years. Life had drifted them apart. Still, it was good to see him. "Matt," Simon said, surprised. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Colin said, clapping him on the shoulder with a little too much enthusiasm. "Your girl's wedding?" "Hell, I practically watched her grow up." Simon chuckled. "Yeah, you were around back in the day." Colin raised his glass. To fatherhood. They clinked glasses, and Simon nodded, though something in his chest felt odd, nostalgic, bittersweet. He looked around, scanning the crowd. Lauren was across the lawn, talking to the caterer. Elegant as ever in her fitted emerald green dress, her blonde hair swept into an updo that made her look 10 years younger. She caught his eye and gave him a brief smile, but not the kind that reached her eyes. Not the way she used to smile when they were still young and in love. He shook it off. As the evening progressed, Simon made his rounds. He thanked guests, posed for photos, gave a speech that made people laugh and cry. He told the story of how Chloe used to make wedding plans when she was 6 years old, sketching them out in crayons and tape. People applauded. Lauren even wiped a tear from her eye. And in that moment, everything felt right. Later, after the first dance, Simon stood near the open bar, sipping a scotch and letting the joy of the night wash over him. He deserved to enjoy this. He'd worked 2 jobs through most of his 30s, sacrificed vacations and weekends, and took side gigs fixing plumbing and HVAC systems just to put food on the table. IVF treatments had nearly bankrupted them, but Lauren had wanted a big family, and he made sure she got one. 5 beautiful kids. 5 reasons he kept pushing even when he wanted to collapse. He smiled at himself. He had done all right. "Dad," his youngest son Tyler called out. "Come take a photo with us." Simon made his way toward the large decorative arch where all 5 of his children were gathered, laughing and posing with exaggerated grins. He playfully tugged on his son's tie. "Can't believe you're taller than me now. What the hell are they feeding you in college?" "Stress and energy drinks," Tyler said with a snort. As the photographer snapped a few pictures, Simon spotted Colin again, this time standing in the circle of his children. They all surrounded him like moths to a flame, laughing at something he'd just said. Colin had always been charming, good with people. Simon tried not to be bothered by it, but the sight was odd. Chloe leaned her head on Colin's shoulder as he wrapped an arm around her casually. Then his second oldest daughter, Julia, gave him a fist bump and said something that made all the kids laugh. Simon furrowed his brow. He took a slow step forward. That's when Lauren approached the group, weaving between tables, holding a flute of champagne. Simon watched her closely. She smiled brightly at Colin, touched his shoulder, and then kissed him. Not a cheek kiss. Not a polite old friend kiss. A kiss on the lips. Quick, subtle, but unmistakable. Simon froze mid-step, his heart skipping like a scratched record. No one seemed to notice. The kid just kept talking. Lauren leaned in to whisper something to Colin that made him smirk. Then she glanced casually around, her expression calm, unbothered. Simon felt a chill run up his spine despite the warm evening air. He blinked. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was nothing. A mistake. A misread moment. He rubbed his jaw and turned away, walking back toward the bar slowly, his drink sloshing in his glass. But the knot in his stomach didn't untangle. He tried to brush it off, tried to convince himself it was harmless. But that kiss, it was brief. It was strange, and it wasn't nothing. Simon swallowed hard and looked back one last time toward the group, where his wife stood beside his best friend and their children. He told himself not to overthink it, but something deep inside him, the part of him that had weathered decades of life, of loyalty, of quiet sacrifice, was already beginning to stir. Chapter 2. Whisper Doubts. Simon woke the morning after the wedding with a headache that had nothing to do with alcohol. The kiss. It had followed him into his dreams, broken into pieces, repeating like a scene stuck on a loop. Lauren's lips on Colin's, brief, casual, but far too familiar. Every time he closed his eyes, it played again. He sat at the edge of the bed, staring out the hotel window. The sun had just risen, casting long shadows across the quiet valley below. Lauren was still asleep, her back turned to him. The silk strap of her nightgown had slipped off one shoulder. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. He wanted to believe nothing was wrong. Wanted to, but something inside him, a quiet whisper, was beginning to turn into a voice. He didn't bring it up that morning. He helped pack their things, answered texts from guests thanking them for the event, and helped Lauren navigate checkout. On the surface, everything was normal. Too normal. The following week passed in a strange blur. Lauren was distracted. At first, Simon chalked it up to post-wedding exhaustion. But by Wednesday, it was hard not to notice. She was always on her phone, texting under the covers late at night, taking long calls in the garden with the door closed. When he asked who it was, she'd smile and say, "Just Julia." She's still decompressing. Simon wanted to believe her. But then there were the conversations, strained, clipped, as if her mind was always somewhere else. They used to talk about everything. Plans for the future, small victories at work, what to cook for dinner. Now, she mostly responded with nods or absent-minded MMHMs, the kind you give when you're not really listening. He noticed other things, too. The kids didn't text him back like they used to. When he FaceTimed Chloe to ask how the honeymoon had gone, she kept it short and awkward. "Yeah, it was good, Dad," she said, brushing hair out of her face. "Thanks again for everything. You really went all out." There was a pause. Simon smiled. "Of course. You only get one wedding." "Well, hopefully." She laughed, but it sounded forced. Then she said, "Hey, I gotta go. We're meeting up with, friends." He didn't ask which friends. Something about her hesitation told him he wouldn't like the answer. On Friday night, he and Lauren had dinner at a local Italian place they hadn't been to in years. The lighting was dim, the music soft, and the smell of garlic bread brought back memories. They used to come here before kids, when everything was still fresh and exciting. They sat at a corner booth, both pretending nothing had changed. Lauren ordered wine. Simon stuck with water. Halfway through the meal, he tried to break the silence. "You remember our 3rd anniversary?" he said, smiling. "You got so drunk you tried to dance on the table." Lauren blinked. "That wasn't our 3rd. That was the 5th. He frowned. "No, I'm pretty sure it was the 3rd. "No," she said flatly, sipping her wine. "You always get stuff like that mixed up." Her tone wasn't playful. It was sharp, cold. Simon stared at her for a second, unsure what to say. She didn't look up. He went quiet, pushing a piece of lasagna around his plate. When the check came, she didn't even glance his way, just grabbed her purse and headed to the car. The next day, Simon was fixing the garage door when Tyler came over. His youngest son, once inseparable from Simon on weekends, now stood with crossed arms, scrolling his phone between brief glances at the tools. You've been working on that thing for weeks, Tyler muttered. Simon wiped sweat from his brow. It's a complicated mechanism. Or maybe you just suck at it now. Simon blinked. Excuse me. Tyler looked up, a smug grin on his face. Kidding, Dad. Jesus, relax. It was the same kind of biting sarcasm Simon had been hearing more and more. Jabs disguised as jokes. Dismissive tones. The kind you use with a stranger you don't respect. Later that evening, Simon stood by the living room window, staring out at the backyard. The swing set he'd built himself still stood there, faded, creaking but sturdy. He'd pushed all 5 kids on that swing at different times, taught them how to pump their legs, how to jump off mid-swing and land like superheroes. Now, none of them even looked at it when they came over. He felt distant from them, like a man slowly being erased from his own life. One night, unable to sleep, Simon lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Lauren scrolled her phone beside him. He turned his head and asked softly, "You remember the first time we brought Chloe home from the hospital?" Lauren didn't even look up. Vaguely. "What? You cried when a nurse handed her to you. Said she looked just like your grandmother." Lauren blinked at her screen. "I think you're misremembering. I didn't say that." "Yes, you did. I remember it clearly." "Well, maybe that's how you remember it." She didn't say it unkindly, but the dismissal stung more than if she had screamed at him. Simon rolled onto his side, away from her, and closed his eyes. But the ache in his chest only grew louder. Sunday afternoon, they attended a neighbor's barbecue. People laughed, grilled burgers, drank too much beer. Simon found himself talking to Greg, an old friend from his construction days. They hadn't caught up in years. "So you really paid for that whole wedding?" Greg asked, shaking his head. "That place must have cost, what, 70, 80 grand? Simon chuckled. "Closer to 100. Greg let out a low whistle. "Damn, you're a good man, Danny. Still got 5 kids, right?" "Yeah, all grown now." Greg raised his beer and gave him a sideways look. "You sure they're yours?" Simon laughed reflexively, but the sound came out thin, strained. Greg laughed too, oblivious, slapping him on the back. Simon smiled, but the words lingered like a splinter under the skin. He laughed nervously, but the question lingered. Chapter 3. Secrets Behind Smiles. Simon had never considered himself a suspicious man. He believed in trust, in loyalty, in the idea that love, true love, was a kind of armor against betrayal. But lately, that armor felt paper-thin. Ever since the wedding, ever since that kiss, he'd been caught in a strange space between disbelief and dread. Something was wrong, and the more he tried to ignore it, the louder that gut-deep warning screamed inside him. It started small. That Monday, while organizing leftover wedding receipts, Simon realized something odd. Several big-ticket items had been paid from an account he didn't even recognize. Floral arrangements, dress alterations, venue deposits. He furrowed his brow and looked over at Lauren, who was lounging on the couch, flipping through a magazine. "Hey," he said carefully, holding up the receipts. "Where did these charges come from? Did we open a new account or something?" She didn't look up. "Oh, I handled a lot of the vendor stuff with Julia. Some of it went through her Venmo. Don't worry about it." He hesitated. "It just wasn't mentioned. I like to stay in the loop, you know." Lauren shrugged. "You were working those long hours. It was easier this way." Something about the way she said it, dismissive, like a mother talking to a forgetful child, made the hairs on his arms rise. He dropped the subject, but he didn't forget. The next evening, Simon stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes while Lauren paced on the patio outside. Phone pressed to her ear. The sliding door was shut, but her body language spoke volumes. Sharp gestures, animated expressions, the way she smiled, then immediately glanced toward the window to see if he was watching. He kept scrubbing the same plate. When she came back inside 20 minutes later, her voice had dropped to that careful, neutral tone. "That was the caterer," she said, placing her phone on the counter. Simon nodded slowly. "You've been talking to them a lot for a wedding that already happened." Lauren flashed a tight smile. "We had a few billing issues. It's nothing." But Simon remembered clearly. He had paid the caterer in full 2 days before the event. Something didn't add up. That night, after Lauren had gone to sleep, Simon sat in his office and pulled up the guest list spreadsheet she'd kept on their shared drive. There, buried in one of the tabs, was a folder titled Vendor Contacts, Colin. His stomach flipped. He clicked it. Inside were notes, timelines, and payment confirmations. Colin's name was listed next to almost everything. Seating arrangements, audio setup, lighting design. Apparently, he'd been coordinating logistics for weeks. But no one had ever told Simon. 3 days later, Simon ran into Julia at the grocery store. She wore oversized sunglasses and AirPods, dressed in a designer workout set she probably couldn't afford on her entry-level salary. When she noticed him, she gave a half-hearted smile. "Dad, hey." "Hey, Jules," he said, smiling despite himself. "What are the odds?" "Small town," she said, tossing almond milk into her basket. "How's Mom?" Simon hesitated. "She's good." They wandered down the cereal aisle together, the conversation stiff and shallow until he asked casually, "So I saw that Colin helped with the wedding stuff. When did that happen?" Julia paused. "Oh, yeah, he was helping out for a while. Mom brought him in when the planner bailed. He's got great taste, honestly." "Right," Simon said, keeping his voice even. "And when did he fly in?" "Oh, I think 2 weeks before. Maybe more. He stayed at that Airbnb over on Hawthorne. Mom handled it." Simon tried to mask the jolt in his chest. 2 weeks. In town. Living 10 minutes away. And no one thought to mention it? "Interesting," he said softly. Julia didn't catch the tone. She was already scrolling her phone again, distracted. "Anyway, I gotta go. Yoga in 20. He watched her leave, her back to him, headphones back in. She didn't even say goodbye. Back at home, Simon opened Lauren's laptop while she was out on a late lunch meeting with a florist she supposedly forgot to tip. He knew he was crossing a line, but some part of him whispered that line had already been crossed. He wasn't looking for evidence of cheating. Not exactly. He just needed answers. Needed to stop feeling crazy. The browser history told part of the story. Multiple searches for local wine bars, romantic dinner spots, day spas, all dated before the wedding. One entry caught his eye. Private massage for 2. Sonoma couples package. The date aligned with the week before the ceremony. He stared at the screen, fists clenching slowly. It still wasn't proof, but it was something. When Lauren returned that evening, she walked in humming a tune, a little too cheerful. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she smiled at the screen before locking it quickly. Simon stood in the kitchen doorway, watching. "Good lunch?" he asked, voice low. She looked up, startled. "Yeah. What?" "You seemed happy." Lauren tilted her head. "Is that a problem?" He said nothing, just studied her for a long moment. She held his gaze a second too long, then walked past him, brushing his arm like nothing had changed. But everything had. That night, he stood at the bathroom sink brushing his teeth while Lauren got undressed behind him. She was humming again. Something old. Familiar. He watched her in the mirror. The way she carefully set down her earrings, folded her blouse, placed her necklace in a velvet pouch. Ritualistic. Controlled. Clean. When she crawled into bed, she didn't face him. Simon lay awake for hours, eyes open, thoughts racing. His wife had lied. His best friend had moved in right under his nose. His children, once the center of his universe, had left him out of every decision. And he had no idea what the hell was happening. He felt like a man locked in a dark room, fumbling blindly for a light switch that might not even exist. Every instinct screamed at him to demand answers. But answers required confrontation. Confrontation required proof. And proof was still out of reach. A storm of suspicion brewed, but Simon felt trapped in a nightmare with no proof and no way out. Chapter 4. Shattered Illusions. The chapel glowed like something out of a dream. Twinkling chandeliers cast warm, golden light across polished marble floors and rows of pristine white chairs. Orchids and roses bloomed in every corner, and soft music from a live quartet filled the space with a romantic hum. Every detail had been designed for perfection, and it was. It was stunning. Simon stood near the altar, dressed in a crisp black tuxedo, hands clasped in front of him, trying not to let the weight in his chest betray the proud smile he wore. People were arriving now, all dressed to impress. Friends from work, extended family, old neighbors, and even some clients. A few slapped him on the back, praising the venue. Must have cost a fortune. someone whispered behind him. Yeah, but damn, he did it right. Classy. Simon nodded absently, but the compliments rolled off him like rain on a windshield. All he could think about was his daughter, his little girl, Chloe, about to become someone's wife. 1,000 memories surged. Her tiny hand is on her first day of kindergarten, late-night crying spells after breakups, college move-in day when she hugged him tighter than he'd expected. Now she was a bride. When the music shifted, the crowd turned. The groom, nervous and fidgety, took his place beside the officiant. Simon inhaled deeply and turned to face the aisle. Then he saw her. Chloe walked slowly down the aisle, her white gown shimmering under the lights. Her face was calm, radiant, but not quite smiling. It wasn't nerves, he could tell. It was something else, something hard to name. He tried to shake the thought. Not now. Not today. She reached the altar, and he kissed her cheek gently. Her perfume was the same she wore to prom. He nearly lost it right there. You look beautiful, he whispered. Thanks, Dad, she replied softly, not quite meeting his eyes. He stepped back as the ceremony began. Vows were exchanged. Rings slipped onto fingers. People wiped tears. The whole thing was flawless. And Simon felt like a ghost in the middle of it. At the reception, the mood shifted into celebration. People filled the massive reception tent outside, which had been set up on the far side of the vineyard estate. A live band played jazz near the dance floor. Waiters moved between guests with silver trays of champagne flutes. Laughter rolled through the warm evening air like thunder in the distance. Simon stood near the bar, watching it all unfold. He didn't drink much anymore, but tonight he made an exception. Scotch on the rocks. Something to dull the strange emptiness in his chest. He should have felt proud, and he did, but it was pride tangled in confusion and pain. People kept coming up to him. Dan, your girl is incredible. You must be the happiest man alive. Such a beautiful family. You did good. He nodded, smiled, pretended, but the compliments felt like barbs. When he caught a glimpse of Lauren, she was laughing at a corner table with Colin, their faces close. She leaned into him slightly, as if the rest of the room didn't exist. Her hand touched his knee under the table, casual, intimate. Simon's jaw tightened. He'd barely spoken to Lauren all evening. She'd spent more time circling guests than sharing any moment with him. Every time he tried to find her, she was somewhere else, laughing, posing for pictures, vanishing behind groups of people. The kids weren't much better. Tyler had passed by him earlier with nothing more than a distracted nod. Julia was glued to her phone, and Chloe, the bride, hadn't spoken to him since the ceremony. He watched them all interact with Colin, though, laughing with him, clapping him on the back, hugging him like he was the centerpiece of their joy. He took another sip of scotch. Later in the evening, during the father-daughter dance, Simon finally had a moment alone with Chloe. The band played something soft and nostalgic, unforgettable, maybe. He couldn't hear it clearly over the blood pounding in his ears. You happy? He asked as they swayed. Chloe gave him a tight smile. Yeah, that's all that matters. There was a pause. Uncle Colin looked proud of you, he added, testing her tone. She blinked. He's always been around, Dad. Simon looked down at her. Not really. She didn't answer. He didn't push it. The song ended, and she kissed his cheek before returning to her new husband. As she walked away, Simon felt the final string that connected them strain and fray. Later still, the cake was cut, the dance floor full, and guests started letting loose. Simon stood alone under a string of hanging lanterns, staring out at the rows of grapevines glowing under the moonlight. His scotch had gone warm in his hand. That's when he saw them. Near the dance floor, Lauren and Colin stood surrounded by the kids. All 5 of them. They were laughing. Lauren threw her head back, hand on Colin's chest, like a woman half her age flirting with a college flame. Julia leaned on his shoulder. Tyler offered him a fist bump. It wasn't the first time Simon had seen this kind of closeness between them, but tonight it felt louder, clearer, bolder. He stepped forward, parting through groups of guests like a sleepwalker. Lauren said something and laughed. Colin leaned into her, whispering something back. Then Lauren reached up, her hand brushing his cheek, and she kissed him, right there, in front of the kids. It wasn't a peck. It wasn't polite. It wasn't subtle. It was real. It was long enough to silence Simon's breath. His hand shook. The glass in his fingers tilted, scotch sloshing over the rim. He blinked, hoping desperately that he was wrong, that his angle was off, that it was some weird trick of light and shadow. But it wasn't. Lauren and Colin stood close, her hand still on his chest. And the kids? They just smiled, like this was normal, like he wasn't even there. Simon turned away, but the image burned in his mind like acid behind his eyes. Chapter 5. The Confession. Simon's footsteps were slow at first, careful. He didn't even realize he was moving toward them. It was instinctual, like a current pulling him forward. The wedding was alive with celebration. A tipsy aunt sang off-key near the DJ booth while a cluster of college-age guests screamed lyrics to an early 2000 song. Laughter echoed across the vineyard. Glasses clinked. The air smelled of roses, wine, and sweat. But for Simon, everything felt muffled now, like he was walking through water. All he could see was that corner near the dance floor, just under the canopy of white lights. Lauren, Colin, and their 5 children, his 5 children, stood close, locked in a bubble of laughter and closeness. Like a family within a family. No, he thought. Don't jump to conclusions. Maybe there's an explanation. But the way Lauren tilted her head toward Colin, the way her fingers traced lazily across his sleeve, and the way Colin looked back at her like she was the only person in the world, it wasn't friendship. It wasn't casual. It was something else. Something primal. Something cruel. Simon moved closer. The music faded to a dull thump in his ears. Every sound drowned under the thunder of his own heartbeat. Then he heard her voice. Lauren, laughing, mocking. Can you believe he still thinks he's been raising his own kids? She said, her tone dripping with venomous amusement. We convinced him all those years that the procedure worked. Simon froze. Lauren giggled again and leaned into Colin's ear. They're yours, babe, she whispered with a smirk. Every single one of them. Simon's vision blurred for a moment. The world tilted beneath his feet. Colin just grinned, cocky, pleased, smug. The kids laughed too. All of them. Even Julia, who used to run to him when she scraped her knee. Even Chloe, whose first heartbreak he'd comforted through sleepless nights. Even Tyler, the youngest. Tyler turned toward Colin and laughed, then looked over his shoulder, as if making sure no one could hear. His voice was loud enough to cut straight through Simon's chest. We pretended to that stupid man that we're his good little kids. Uncle Colin's our real dad anyway. Simon didn't feel the drink fall from his hand. The glass hit the ground with a soft crack, ice scattering near his shoes. No one noticed. Not them. Not the guests still dancing under strobe lights. Not the servers clearing plates from tables. No one saw a man unraveling in the shadows. His knees buckled slightly, and he stumbled back a step, grabbing the edge of a wine barrel to steady himself. He couldn't breathe. His lungs had seized up. His ears were ringing. He blinked rapidly, trying to wake up, to force the dream to end, but it didn't. Lauren was still laughing, Colin still nodding along proudly, and the kids, his kids, were still smiling like none of it mattered. Like this was funny. Like the man who'd sacrificed his entire life for them was just some extra in their little performance. Simon's entire life, his marriage, his fatherhood, his purpose came crashing down in a single, silent moment. He saw every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every scraped knee, every back-to-school photo, all of it. Fake. They weren't his. They were Colin's. And Lauren had known the entire time. Every hug, every "I love you, Dad," every single one of them a lie. His world crashes. One of the kids, his youngest son, adds with a smirk. We pretended to that stupid man that we're his good little kids. Uncle Colin's our real dad anyway. Simon's heart stops. His knees buckle. Everyone is too drunk, dancing, or oblivious to the corner where his soul is breaking. Chapter 6. The Fallout. Simon stood still for a moment longer after the words struck him like shrapnel. Lauren's voice, smug and venomous. Colin's chuckle. Tyler's cruel confession. It all echoed in his mind like a war drum pounding against the walls of his skull. But he didn't storm over. He didn't scream. He turned and walked away. He didn't look back. He stepped over spilled champagne and confetti scattered on the floor like wedding day ashes. Past the couples dancing to the beat of a song he couldn't hear anymore. Past the waiter holding a tray of champagne flutes. Past all of it. It was like walking out of a burning house with everything he'd ever loved still inside. He made his way to the DJ booth, calmly enough that no one reacted. The man looked up, startled by Simon's dead-eyed expression. "I need the mic," Simon said flatly. The DJ hesitated mid-song. "Now." The man handed it over. Simon stepped to the front of the reception tent, gripping the microphone with a steady hand. The song faded. Conversations quieted. Dozens of smiling guests looked toward him, expecting another heartfelt speech from the father of the bride. Chloe caught sight of him. Her face shifted, confused, maybe concerned. Lauren was nowhere in sight yet. Colin was probably still basking in his own filth, unaware of the bomb Simon was about to drop. He cleared his throat once. Then, without emotion, he said, "This celebration is over. Ask my wife and best friend why." The microphone popped with silence after the last word. There was no explanation, no elaboration, just those 12 words, spoken like a man handing over a death sentence. The stunned silence was broken by a single clink of a fork on glass. A gasp, then the murmur spread like wildfire. "Wait, what did he say? Did he just... What's going on?" Chloe stepped forward. "Dad!" Simon placed the mic back on the DJ's table and walked away before she could reach him. Just walked. Through the murmurs. Through the disbelief. Through the growing chaos. He got in his car, started the engine, and drove off. His tuxedo jacket still on. Tie loosened. Mouth dry. He didn't shed a tear. Not then. That Monday morning, the lawyer's office smelled like ink and coffee. Simon sat in the leather chair across from a woman in a gray blazer. Her eyes were sharp. Professional. "You're certain about this?" she asked. Simon nodded once. "Draw it up. I want it done fast." He handed over the envelope, photocopies of old paperwork, a brief typed letter, and what he had revised the night before. "No assets to the children?" He shook his head. "Not a penny." The lawyer blinked. "Even your youngest?" He looked her straight in the eye. They knew. Every one of them. She didn't ask further, just nodded and began typing. By Wednesday, Lauren had been served divorce papers. She called that evening. He let it ring. She called again. Then texts. "Dan, can we talk? Please. You're blowing things out of proportion. The kids are devastated. I don't know what you think you heard." He never replied. He blocked her number the next morning. The kids called next. Julia left a voicemail. "Dad, what are you doing? We need to talk. You can't just erase us." Chloe tried a softer tone. "Please, Dad. I know you're hurt, but it's not what you think. Can we meet just once?" Tyler didn't bother pretending. "So you're really just abandoning us? That's what this is. You're a coward." Simon didn't respond to any of them. He felt something deep inside himself harden, a final wall going up, one that no memory or apology would ever tear down again. By the end of the week, word had spread. Friends texted cautiously, unsure of what had happened. Lauren, true to form, tried to control the narrative. Social media posts painted her as the confused wife of a husband who spiraled under wedding pressure. She posted a throwback photo of the family at Disneyland with a long caption about betrayal, trying to twist a knife. But her followers weren't blind. Whispers began circulating. Someone had overheard the damning conversation that night. Someone else saw the kiss. Even Lauren's carefully curated image couldn't survive the weight of the truth for long. Colin? Gone. Disappeared 2 days after the reception. No goodbye. No explanation. Blocked Simon, blocked the kids. Vanished like a coward with blood on his hands. Lauren tried calling again from a different number. Simon picked up once. She started crying the second he said hello. "You're destroying everything," she wept. "No," he said. "You already did." Click. On Friday night, Simon stood alone in his driveway, looking up at the dark sky. The air was cool. Still, the kind of silence that only arrives after everything explodes. He had given them everything. His loyalty, his time, his heart. They'd used him as a prop in their little lie. A paycheck, a babysitter, a man to pose for pictures and sign tuition checks. He didn't even know who he'd been living with anymore. So he chose silence. Not weakness, but power. No screaming, no vengeance. Just distance. Cold, calculating distance. Simon didn't scream, doesn't fight. He simply walks away, leaving Lauren and the kids with nothing. Public fallout erupts. The kids beg him to reconsider. Lauren tries to twist the story. Colin disappears. But Simon stays silent. Calculated. Distant. Chapter 7. Goes to the past. The silence in Simon's new apartment was both a comfort and a torment. A single couch, a mattress on the floor, half-unpacked boxes, and bare white walls. It was the opposite of the life he had built for 30 years. No pictures of smiling children. No wedding portraits. Just space and time. Time to think. Time to remember. And memories, painful, unwanted, relentless, came crawling back like ghosts. It was winter, 14 years ago. Lauren had cried into her hands at the kitchen table, a fertility report lying between them. They said it's you, she whispered. Low motility. It's not your fault, Dan. He'd taken her hands in his. We'll fix it, he'd said. He remembered researching clinics until 3 a.m., calling doctors, cashing out a chunk of his retirement to cover IVF. They tried once. Then again. Every round failed. Lauren had cried more, but oddly never with him, not like before. She stayed out longer with friends from yoga and came home quiet, withdrawn. I'm tired, she'd often say. Can't talk right now. He didn't question her. Not then. Back in the present, Simon rubbed his temples, staring into his cold coffee. It felt like a fever dream. Every act of loyalty now twisted into something pitiful. Every kind gesture, a brick in the prison they'd built for him. A memory surfaced. Lauren and Colin at a barbecue. Summer evening. Laughter echoing off the fence. Lauren had spilled wine on her dress. Oh no, she laughed, brushing it down. Colin had offered his handkerchief. Their fingers touched a little too long. Simon had seen it, brushed it off. Another ghost. Another night. 5 years into their marriage. Lauren came home humming. You're in a good mood, Simon said. She smiled, that tilted smile he now recognized as fake. Just a good day. I stopped by Colin's shop. He helped me pick out a necklace. He remembered the necklace. Expensive. Stylish. It was her favorite for years. She never said it was a gift from Colin. Did you tell him about the adoption idea? He'd asked. Her smile froze for a second. Oh, not yet. That had been the week she'd told him she was pregnant. IVF had finally worked, she claimed. He'd cried, fallen to his knees, held her belly even before it began to show. She'd kissed his forehead and said, We did it, babe. Together. Back in the apartment, Simon opened his laptop. He hadn't wanted to do this. Hadn't touched it since the wedding. But something inside him screamed for the truth. The full truth. He opened an old external hard drive. Photos from over the years loaded slowly, vacations, birthdays, school dances. His smile in everyone. Colin in more than a few. Uncle Matt. At swim meets, school plays, graduations. But what caught his eye was a folder Lauren had once transferred over old medical scans and IVF receipts. He clicked it open. There it was. The receipt for the final IVF procedure. But the date, it was months after she claimed to be pregnant. He double-checked the ultrasound date she gave him. They didn't line up. Not even close. She lied. The procedures never worked. She already was pregnant when she pretended the test finally came back positive. Simon's breath hitched. He clicked further. Found emails she had forwarded for backup once, probably never thinking he'd see them. One was to Colin. He believes it. God, I can't believe how easy this was. I told him the last procedure finally worked. He cried. What a joke. I almost feel bad, Colin replied. Almost. Simon slammed the laptop shut. His hands shook with fury. His chest burned. They'd planned it. Planned him. Another ghost rose. He remembered a night when Lauren came home late. Almost 1 a.m. Simon had been half asleep on the couch, TV still humming. She crept in, thinking he was out cold. He heard the water run in the bathroom. Then silence. He got up. Lauren. She froze in the hallway. Still dressed up. I was out with Chloe's teacher friends, she lied. We went for drinks after the school board thing. He believed her. He wanted to believe her. How many lies had he swallowed? Every time she told him, I love you, Every time Colin toasted him for being such a great dad. Every time the kids brought him gifts on Father's Day, looking up at him with eyes that never truly mirrored his own. They all knew. He remembered the tone in Tyler's voice that night. Mocking. Chloe's sudden silence when Colin entered the room. Julia always posting photos with Colin captioned, "Best uncle ever." They had known. Maybe not at first, but eventually. And none of them said a word. Simon stood up and went to the window. The street was quiet. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Older, yes. Wiser now, too. But something inside him still screamed. He wasn't just a betrayed husband. He had been a prisoner. A puppet. Used. Manipulated. Played like a violin while they danced in the shadows. And he had worked himself to the bone to give them everything. The house. The schooling. The $1 million wedding. All for a family that wasn't his. And all the while, the two people he trusted most, his wife and his best friend, had built their perfect life on top of his bones. They conspired, while he was working graveyard shifts, while he was driving Lauren to appointments that were never real, while he was breaking himself to be enough. Flashbacks reveal how Colin and Lauren's affair began early in the marriage, while Simon was working overtime to support IVF treatments. Lauren and Colin conspired to trick Simon, telling him the fertility procedures had worked. In reality, Lauren got pregnant the natural way with Colin. Their plan was to keep Simon working, spending, and parenting a puppet with a paycheck. They never thought he'd find out. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. Simon sat in the corner booth of a quiet restaurant just off Main Street, the kind of place he used to take the family to on Friday nights. The lighting was warm, the faint sound of soft jazz playing in the background. But nothing felt warm now. He wore a plain gray jacket, clean-shaven, his hair slicked back. Calm on the outside, but inside? A war zone. He didn't want to be here. But Lauren begged. She'd left voicemails, sent emails, showed up at his old job, and even cried on his mother's porch. Desperation had replaced smugness in her voice. So Simon agreed. One meeting, one night, one conversation, and then nothing. He sipped his water as the front door opened. Lauren walked in first, eyes red-rimmed, face pale and drawn. Behind her shuffled the kids, Chloe, Julia, Ben, Tyler, and the youngest, Owen. All grown, all dressed as if trying to look like good kids again. Simon's stomach clenched. They didn't deserve that title anymore. They slid into the booth across from him. The silence hung heavy, thicker than the air. Lauren spoke first. "Simon, thank you for agreeing to see us." Her voice cracked. "I know nothing I say can undo what we did, but I need you to hear me. Please." Simon stared at her. No sympathy, no warmth. "You have 5 minutes," he said coldly. Lauren winced. "I made a mistake," she started, fingers trembling. "A terrible one. I was young, confused. Colin and what we did was wrong, but it was never supposed to go this far. I never stopped loving you." "Don't," Simon cut in sharply. "Don't insult me with that word. You loved yourself. And Colin. And your little fantasy. You didn't love me. You used me." Lauren blinked back tears. "I never meant to hurt you like this. I thought I was doing what was best for the kids. For the family." At that, Simon laughed, bitter and hollow. "The family," he repeated. "Whose family, Lauren? Mine? Or the one you built behind my back with your lover?" Owen looked down at the table. Julia looked like she wanted to run. Ben crossed his arms, scowling. "You could have left," Simon continued. "You could have told me the truth. But no, you let me work myself half to death. You let me carry the weight of fatherhood, the finances, the stress, the sleepless nights, everything, while you and Colin laughed behind closed doors." Chloe spoke up. "Dad, we didn't ask for this. We didn't know." "You knew enough," Simon snapped, eyes locking on hers. "Don't pretend you were clueless. I remember birthdays where you all spent more time clinging to Uncle Colin than even looking at me." Tyler snorted. "Man, you're really going to cry about that now? After everything you gave us? You're just walking away? Like a coward." Simon turned his gaze on Tyler. Calm. Controlled. "No. A coward stays and accepts disrespect. A coward clings to a lie because the truth hurts. I'm not a coward. I'm just done." Lauren's lip trembled. "I swear, Simon, I'd take it back if I could. I was lost. You thought I'd never find out," he said. You thought I was too stupid, too loyal, too busy working 3 jobs to see that my wife was getting pregnant the natural way with my best friend. That's what you thought. The table fell dead silent. Even the jazz in the background felt muffled. Julia finally broke, her voice a whisper. I didn't know, Dad. Not at first. But when I found out, I didn't know how to tell you. You tell the truth, Simon said. That's what people who love each other do. Chloe nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. We all messed up. Ben muttered under his breath. This is all so dramatic. Simon turned his attention to his children, one by one. I changed your diapers. I taught you to ride bikes. I worked overtime for braces, birthdays, dance recitals, college tuition. And every time I looked at you, I believed you were mine. Because I chose to believe. Because I wanted you to be. They looked away. He leaned forward. You didn't just betray me, Simon said, voice shaking. You erased me. You let another man take my place while I was still in the room. Lauren broke into sobs. I never meant— Yes, you did. Simon finally shouted. Heads turned across the restaurant. You meant to trick me. You meant to keep me working, paying, believing. Don't you dare say you didn't mean it. He stood up. Everyone flinched. He took a breath, lowered his voice. You didn't just cheat on me. You stole my life. You turned me into a fool and used my loyalty as a weapon. The children were stunned. Lauren sobbed uncontrollably now, face buried in her hands. Simon picked up his jacket from a booth. They were all still looking at him, pleading, angry, ashamed, confused. He looked them over one last time. Not with love, with detachment. He had given them his life, and they gave him lies. You're all strangers to me now, he said softly, firmly. And strangers don't get my love or my name. Chapter 9. Redemption and Rebirth. The for sale sign went up the same week the divorce was finalized. Simon stood on the front lawn of what used to be his house. The house he built, paid for, bled, and aged in. The white shutters he repainted 3 times. The porch swing he hung the night Lauren told him they were finally pregnant. All a lie. He watched the realtor place the sign into the ground like a headstone. A quiet funeral for a life that never really belonged to him. He sold everything. The house. The boat he never had time to use. The cabin upstate where he dreamed of retiring with grandchildren at his feet. Gone. What wasn't gone was the pain, but at least now it had room to breathe. Simon didn't rage. He didn't crumble. He simply packed, signed the papers, and drove away from the ashes with nothing but a single suitcase and the raw determination to start again. He began small. A modest apartment near the coast. Clean walls, quiet neighbors, no memories haunting the corners. Therapy twice a week. He didn't say much at first, just stared out the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. But over time, words came. Not graceful or poetic, but honest. I love people who never loved me back. I wasted 25 years being proud of a lie. I don't know who I am without them. His therapist, a woman named Marianne with kind eyes and firm boundaries, never pitted him. She nodded, sometimes challenged him, and once said, You were never the fool, Simon. You were just committed. That's not weakness. That's a strength that was exploited. That line stuck with him. Months passed. Simon walked more. He went on hikes. He dusted off his old guitar and played again, even if the strings hurt his fingers. He joined a local fishing club, not because he loved fishing, but because it got him talking to people again. Men, fathers, veterans, divorced, betrayed, widowed. Every man had a scar, and somehow they all recognized each other. You're that guy, one of them said one evening, passing him a beer. The wedding guy. Heard what happened. Damn shame, man. Simon chuckled. You heard. It made the news. Small-town gossip meets soap opera. People couldn't look away. He nodded. Let him look. I'm done hiding. That night, he slept better than he had in years. The loneliness still came in waves. Around the holidays. On birthdays. Especially when he saw little girls in white dresses at the park. But something was different now. He no longer ached for what he lost. He pitied those who threw him away. Lauren had moved out of the house weeks after the sale, her social circle evaporating like steam. Apparently, people didn't sympathize with adulterous wives who mocked the man who raised their children. She tried to play the victim online, posted vague quotes. claimed Simon was controlling, cold, and emotionally absent. The truth didn't need defending. It stood on its own. She was evicted not long after that. The townhouse she moved into foreclosed when Colin disappeared, taking what was left of his dwindling savings with him. Simon never said a word. Not in public. Not online. Not to anyone. Silence was louder than vengeance. The kids began turning on each other. Chloe sued Julia over money their grandmother had left them. Ben tried reaching out to Simon in a half-assed apology email that ended with a request for some financial help to get back on my feet. Tyler left town after getting arrested for public intoxication. Owen was last seen living with a girlfriend who wanted nothing to do with his mess of a family. Simon never responded. He didn't hate them, but he couldn't love them anymore. They weren't his. Not by blood. Not by loyalty. Not even by memory. And that was okay. Then came her. Nora. They met at a bookstore, cliché, maybe, but Simon wasn't looking for romance. He was reaching for a copy of Into the Wild when their fingers brushed. Sorry, she said, flashing a shy smile. Didn't mean to ambush your literary escape. Simon chuckled. Could use a bit of ambushing these days. They started talking. Books, music, road trips, and lost dreams. She was a widow, 2 years alone, kind, sharp-witted, and carried a sadness in her eyes that matched his own. They went for coffee, then lunch, then long walks without destination. But Simon kept his distance. He didn't touch her hand, didn't lean too close. He didn't want to ruin something fragile before it had the chance to become anything at all. You're not ready, Nora said gently one night, as they watched the ocean from the hood of his car. I might never be, Simon admitted. That's okay, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Slowly, something thawed inside him. Not like fire, more like spring. A quiet, gentle melt. He laughed again. Not just small chuckles, but deep, belly laughs that surprised even him. He began writing in a journal. He started playing gigs at the local bar on open mic nights. He slept through the night without dreaming of lies. And one evening, as he stood on the balcony of his small apartment, drink in hand, waves crashing below, Simon finally realized. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need answers. He didn't even need closure. He had peace. And peace was enough. Meanwhile, Lauren is evicted, her reputation ruined. The children fight among themselves over money and blame. Chapter 10. The Lesson. The envelope arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning, slipped under the door of Simon's modest apartment. No return address. Just his name, written in unfamiliar, shaky handwriting. He stared at it for a long moment, fingers lingering over the thick paper. Part of him wanted to throw it away unopened. Too many wounds already, too many reminders of what he'd lost. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, pushed him to tear it open. Inside was a letter from Chloe. The words spilled across the page like a confession, raw and trembling with regret. Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. But I'm sorry. For everything. For the lies, for the silence, for letting you believe the impossible for so long. I miss you. I miss the man I thought you were. And maybe I was the one who wasn't real. I hope you find peace wherever you are. Simon closed his eyes. The letter felt like a thread reaching out, but the chasm between them was still wide, still cold. He carried the letter down to the beach that afternoon. The sky was overcast, waves pounding the shore in steady rhythm, relentless and indifferent. He built a small fire from driftwood and dry branches, the smoke curling upward toward the gray sky. With deliberate slowness, he placed the letter into the flames. It curled, blackened, then crumbled into ash. He watched until the last trace disappeared. The fire sputtered and died. Simon sat back on the sand, the chill creeping through his jacket, and stared out at the vast, restless ocean. His mind drifted back to the wedding night, the laughter, the music, the moment Lauren kissed Colin in front of everyone. That kiss, a betrayal carved into his memory like a scar he would never forget. He recalled the words that shattered his world. Can you believe he still thinks he's been raising his own kids? We convinced him all those years that the procedure worked. They're yours, babe. We pretended to that stupid man that we're his good little kids. Uncle Colin's our real dad anyway. The faces of his children, some angry, some apologetic, all distant, flashed in his mind. He thought of the years he poured into their lives. The early mornings, the missed vacations, the late-night homework help, the unspoken sacrifices. He realized then that he had given everything he had, his heart, his trust, his time, and they had gambled it away, playing with his life like it was a game they'd already won. But Simon also understood something else. He wasn't just a victim of their deceit. He had been a man who loved too much. A man who believed in loyalty so deeply it blinded him to the cracks forming beneath his feet. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, the salty air filling his lungs. Some lessons aren't taught with kindness. Some lessons come in silence and fire. He looked down at the ashes of the letter, then back out at the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a restless gray line. Some people only realize what they had after they've destroyed it. And by then, I'm already gone.